There's a moment in everyone's life when they discover a truth so profound, it changes everything. Carl Jung called it the moment you stop feeding the world your energy and start protecting it instead. Have you ever wondered why some people command respect without saying a word? Why they never seem desperate, never chase, never beg for attention? It's not because they're cold or heartless. It's because they've mastered something most people never learn: the art of strategic unavailability. Picture this. You know someone who doesn't respond to messages immediately, who doesn't explain their every decision, who can say no without a 10-minute justification. When they do show up, people listen. When they speak, it matters. When they're absent, they're missed, not because they're playing games, but because their presence has weight. This is what Jung discovered in his decades of studying the human psyche. The people who protect their energy the most carefully are the ones who have the most energy to give. The ones who are selective with their attention are the ones whose attention actually means something. Today, we're diving deep into one of Jung's most revolutionary concepts: how withdrawing your constant availability doesn't make you antisocial. It makes you powerful. This isn't about becoming a hermit or cutting everyone off. This is about recognizing that your energy is sacred, your attention is valuable, and your peace is non-negotiable. By the end of this video, you'll understand why being constantly available is actually a form of self-betrayal, and how stepping back can transform not just your relationships, but your entire existence. So if you're tired of feeling drained, manipulated, and taken for granted, this message is for you. But first, let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. When was the last time you said no without explaining yourself? When did you last withdraw from a situation without feeling guilty about it? If you can't remember, then you're exactly where you need to be right now. And here's the thing that might shock you. The people who will be most upset by your unavailability are often the ones who've been draining you the most. They'll call it selfish, cold, or mean. But what they're really saying is, "How dare you stop letting me use you?" That reaction alone should tell you everything you need to know about why this transformation is necessary. Let's start with a hard truth that society doesn't want you to know. Your constant availability is not a virtue. It's a prison you've built around yourself. From childhood, you've been conditioned to believe that your worth lies in how accessible you are to others. Be helpful, be understanding, always respond quickly, never leave anyone waiting. Sound familiar? This programming runs so deep that most people never question it. But here's what Carl Jung understood that most therapists today miss: excessive availability is a subtle form of self-abandonment. Every time you drop everything to respond to someone else's needs, every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you make yourself accessible when you need space, you're betraying yourself. Think about your daily life. You wake up and immediately check your phone, flooding your consciousness with other people's thoughts, problems, and demands before you've even had a moment to connect with yourself. You carry your phone like it's life support, responding to messages within minutes as if the world will collapse if you don't. The notification sound has become a Pavlovian trigger that makes you drop whatever you're doing to attend to someone else's needs. You explain yourself constantly, why you made that choice, why you feel that way, why you can't do something right now. You justify your decisions as if every action requires external approval. You defend your choices as if you owe the world an explanation for existing on your own terms. You make yourself available for everyone else's emotional emergencies while your own inner world crumbles in silence. When someone says, "I need to talk," you drop everything. When someone has a crisis, even if it's the same crisis they have every month, you become their unpaid therapist. When someone needs validation for their poor choices, you become their cheerleader. Jung called this living in the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted. But this mask comes at a cost that most people never calculate. The more available you make yourself, the more predictable you become. And everything predictable becomes a tool in someone else's hands. People start using you as their emotional vending machine. They press your buttons when they want attention, validation, or comfort, then put you back on the shelf when they're done. You become their go-to person for problems they created, their therapist for dramas they enjoy, their audience for performances you never asked to see. Here's what's particularly insidious about this dynamic. You start to define your worth by how needed you are. Your self-esteem becomes tied to being indispensable to others. You mistake being used for being loved, being drained for being helpful, being taken for granted for being valued. And the cruelest part? The more available you are, the less valuable you become in their eyes. It's basic psychology. We don't value what's always there. We don't respect what we don't have to earn. Your constant availability doesn't make people appreciate you more. It makes them take you for granted. But what happens when you stop? What happens when you don't respond immediately, don't explain yourself, don't make yourself constantly accessible? That's when everything changes. That's when people reveal who they really are. That's when you discover the difference between those who valued you as a person and those who valued you as a service. Jung didn't see the human psyche as a simple machine that reacts to stimuli. He understood it as an energy system, a finite resource that can be protected or wasted, conserved or drained. This insight is crucial because it explains why some people leave you feeling exhausted while others energize you. Your psychic energy is like a bank account. Every emotional reaction, every response to drama, every attempt to please someone who doesn't value you. These are withdrawals from your energy reserves. And most people are living in emotional bankruptcy without even realizing it. The people who drain you aren't necessarily evil or malicious. They're often just unconscious energy vampires who've learned that you're a reliable source of attention, validation, and emotional labor. They've mapped your triggers, studied your patterns, and learned exactly how to get a reaction from you. Watch how they operate. They don't need to threaten or force anything. They just push the right buttons and watch you respond. A guilt trip here, I thought I could count on you. A crisis there, I don't know what I'll do without your help. A little emotional manipulation, wrapped in concern. I'm just worried about you when you act like this. And suddenly, you're dancing to their tune again. These patterns become so automatic that you don't even notice them happening. The friend who always calls during your dinner time with urgent problems that could wait. The family member who creates drama right before your important events. The colleague who consistently dumps their workload on you with phrases like, "You're so much better at this than I am." Jung called this projection, the psychological mechanism where people project onto others what they can't see in themselves. But here's the darker truth. While they're projecting onto you, you become the receptacle for their unresolved issues. You become their therapist, their emotional dumping ground, their solution to problems they refuse to solve themselves. That friend who only calls when they're in crisis, they're not calling because they value your friendship. They're calling because you're predictably available to absorb their chaos. That partner who always needs you to save the day. They're not appreciating your help. They're addicted to your energy and the drama it creates. That family member who always has an emergency during your vacation. It's not coincidence. It's unconscious control. The most effective manipulation doesn't happen through force. It happens through your own programming, your fear of disappointing others, your need to be needed, your terror of abandonment. They don't control you directly. They just create situations where you control yourself on their behalf. They've learned your emotional triggers better than you have. They know that if they seem helpless enough, you'll rescue them. If they appear hurt enough, you'll abandon your boundaries to comfort them. If they act angry enough, you'll apologize for things that aren't your fault. Here's what's particularly sinister. They often frame their energy vampirism as caring about you. I'm only telling you this because I care. I just want what's best for you. I'm worried about how you're changing. These statements are designed to make you question your own perception and return to being the compliant energy source they're used to. But what happens when you stop feeding this cycle? When you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop making yourself available for their emotional convenience? The game breaks. The projections crumble, and suddenly they're forced to face something they've been avoiding: themselves. Your unavailability becomes a mirror that reflects their own emptiness back at them, and that's when the real attacks begin. Not because you're wrong, but because you've stopped serving as their escape from their own inner work. The intensity of their reaction to your unavailability is directly proportional to how much they were depending on your energy to avoid dealing with their own issues. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think withdrawal means becoming cold, heartless, or antisocial. But Jung understood something deeper. Conscious unavailability is not about building walls. It's about building boundaries. It's not about rejecting the world. It's about choosing yourself. True power doesn't lie in reacting to everything. True power lies in choosing when and how to respond. It's the difference between being a leaf blown by every wind and being a mountain that remains unmoved by storms. Think about the people you most respect. Are they the ones who are constantly available, always reactive, perpetually explaining themselves? Or are they the ones who respond thoughtfully, speak when they have something meaningful to say, and maintain their center regardless of external chaos? When you withdraw strategically, something profound happens. First, you create space. Space to think, to feel, to process without the constant noise of other people's expectations. In this space, clarity emerges. You start seeing patterns you missed before. Cycles of manipulation, games you didn't realize you were playing, dynamics that only existed because you kept feeding them. This clarity is uncomfortable at first because it forces you to confront some harsh realities. You might realize that you've been enabling someone's dysfunction by always rescuing them. You might see that you've been participating in drama because it made you feel needed. You might discover that some of your relationships were built on you being the giver and them being the taker. Strategic withdrawal is like turning off the noise so you can finally hear your own voice. It's in this silence that you begin to remember who you are beneath all the roles you've been playing, all the masks you've been wearing, all the versions of yourself you've created to please others. But here's what makes this withdrawal powerful rather than passive. It's conscious. You're not running away from conflict. You're refusing to engage in battles that aren't worth your energy. You're not avoiding responsibility. You're taking responsibility for your own well-being. You're not being selfish. You're being selective. The difference between healthy withdrawal and toxic isolation is intention. Toxic isolation comes from fear, resentment, or the desire to punish others. Healthy withdrawal comes from self-respect, the need for space, and the wisdom to conserve your energy for what truly matters. Jung talked about individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. This process requires separation from the collective, from the herd mentality, from the constant need for external approval. It requires you to walk alone for a while, not because you hate others, but because you need to remember yourself. When you stop being available for every drama, every crisis, every emotional emergency that isn't actually yours, you begin to reclaim your energy. You start to see how much of your life force was being siphoned off by people who never intended to give anything back. The withdrawal doesn't have to be dramatic. It starts small, not responding to messages immediately, taking the time to consider whether this conversation serves you or drains you. Taking a breath before reacting, asking yourself if this situation requires your emotional investment. Leaving conversations that drain you, recognizing that not every discussion deserves your participation, saying no without a 10-minute explanation, understanding that your reasons are valid even if others don't accept them. Choosing silence over pointless arguments, realizing that some people argue not to understand, but to discharge their own emotional tension onto you. But the effects are profound. People who were used to controlling you through your reactions suddenly find themselves powerless. The dynamics that seemed permanent begin to shift. The roles you thought you had to play start to dissolve, and yes, some people will hate this new version of you. They'll call you cold, distant, changed. But their discomfort isn't your problem. It's information. It tells you everything you need to know about what they valued about you in the first place. If they can't handle you having boundaries, they were never really handling you. They were handling a version of you that served their needs. In our noisy world, everyone wants to be heard. Everyone has an opinion, a reaction, a need to respond immediately to everything. Social media has trained us to have instant takes on every situation, to fill every pause with words, to treat silence as uncomfortable emptiness that must be filled. But there's a power that few understand and even fewer master, the power of conscious silence. This isn't the silence of defeat or passive aggression. This isn't the cold shoulder or the silent treatment designed to punish others. This is the silence of sovereignty. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words because it comes from a place of inner strength rather than outer weakness. Jung saw silence not as emptiness, but as fullness, a fertile ground where inner transformation happens. When you stop reacting, you start observing. When you stop explaining, you start understanding. When you stop defending, you start discovering what's actually worth protecting. Have you noticed how some people panic when you don't respond? How they send follow-up messages with increasing urgency? How they escalate their emotional appeals or even attack you for not engaging? Watch this phenomenon closely. It reveals everything about the dynamics you've been unconsciously participating in. When someone sends you a message designed to provoke a reaction and you don't respond, they often can't handle the silence. They'll send another message, then another. The tone usually escalates. First confusion, then irritation, then anger, then sometimes even apology or manipulation. This progression shows you exactly how much they depended on your predictable responses to feel in control of the interaction. It's not because they miss your voice. It's because your silence disrupts their narrative control. While you're speaking, you're still in their game, playing by their rules, allowing them to direct the conversation where they want it to go. But when you choose silence, you change the entire dynamic. You're no longer dancing to their tune, and that unbalances anyone who's used to controlling you through your reactions. True silence is not the absence of voice, it's mastery over your own energy. It's the refusal to be dragged into other people's emotional chaos. It's the conscious choice not to engage in battles that cost more than they're worth. This mastery reveals itself in multiple ways. Sometimes it's the silence that follows an insult. Instead of immediately defending yourself, you pause and consider whether this person's opinion deserves your emotional energy. Sometimes it's the silence that greets drama. Instead of getting pulled into someone else's crisis, you maintain your peace and let them handle their own emotions. Sometimes it's the silence that responds to manipulation. Instead of explaining yourself or justifying your choices, you simply don't engage with the premise that you owe anyone an explanation for living your life on your terms. But silence has a price, and you need to be prepared for it. It will make you incomprehensible to people who only understood you through your reactions. They knew how to push your buttons, how to get you talking, how to draw you into their emotional world. When you stop responding predictably, they lose their roadmap for interacting with you. It will make you seem cold to those who were used to your warmth being freely available. They confuse your boundaries with rejection, your selectivity with cruelty. They can't distinguish between you being unavailable to their drama and you being unavailable to them as people. It will make you appear arrogant to those who expected you to always explain yourself. They interpret your refusal to justify every decision as superiority when it's actually just self-respect. They mistake your comfort with your own choices for indifference to their opinions. All of this is information, not condemnation. When people react negatively to your silence, they're revealing how much they depended on your noise, your explanations, your defenses, your emotional availability to feel in control of the relationship. The most powerful silence is not the one that disturbs others. It's the silence that reconstructs you from within. In this internal space, free from the constant demands of others, you begin to recover your vital energy. You reconnect with parts of yourself that were buried under everyone else's needs. This is where the real transformation happens. Not in the external drama of who gets upset about your boundaries, but in the internal work of remembering who you are when you're not performing for an audience. In the silence, you hear your own thoughts without the interference of others' expectations. You feel your own emotions without immediately having to manage someone else's response to them. Silence becomes a sanctuary where you can process your experiences without external pressure to reach conclusions quickly or explain yourself to others. It's in this space that wisdom develops, that your authentic voice strengthens, that your inner compass recalibrates to point toward your true north rather than toward what others want from you. Here's a truth that might sting. Your unavailability is the ultimate relationship test. When you stop being constantly accessible, you discover who was really with you and who was just using you. The people who respect your boundaries, who don't guilt you for taking space, who value your presence because it's genuine rather than forced. These are your people. They understand that real connection doesn't require constant availability. They know that authentic relationships are built on mutual respect, not one-sided emotional labor. But the others? The ones who get angry when you don't respond immediately, who make you feel guilty for protecting your energy, who demand explanations for your absence, they reveal something important. They were never connected to you as a person. They were connected to what you provided: validation, attention, emotional support, convenience. Jung understood that every relationship is either nourishing or draining, conscious or unconscious, mutual or parasitic. Your withdrawal serves as a filter that separates authentic connections from emotional transactions. Watch what happens when you become less available. The energy vampires will escalate their demands. They'll create bigger crises, more dramatic situations, more urgent emergencies that somehow always require your immediate attention. This isn't coincidence, it's manipulation. They're trying to regain control over your energy by making you feel guilty for protecting it. The unconscious people will accuse you of changing, becoming cold, being selfish. But here's the reality. You haven't become cold. You've become conscious. You haven't become selfish. You've learned self-respect. You haven't changed. You've simply stopped pretending that everyone else's needs are more important than your own well-being. The authentic people will give you space without taking it personally. They'll respect your boundaries because they have their own. They'll be there when you're available and understanding when you're not, because they know that real relationships aren't built on constant accessibility. This process is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront some harsh realities. You might discover that some relationships you valued were actually one-sided emotional dependencies. You might realize that people you thought cared about you were primarily interested in what you could do for them. But this discomfort is the price of freedom. Every person who falls away when you set boundaries is someone who was holding you back from becoming who you're meant to be. Every relationship that can't survive your self-respect wasn't worth preserving in the first place. The loneliness that comes with this realization is real, but it's not permanent. It's the space between who you were and who you're becoming. It's the sacred pause before authentic connections enter your life. Connections based on mutual respect rather than emotional convenience. When you first withdraw from constant availability, the silence can feel overwhelming. You've been so used to external noise, other people's problems, opinions, demands, that the quiet feels strange, almost frightening. This is where most people give up. They mistake this discomfort for evidence that they're doing something wrong. They rush back to their old patterns, reopening themselves to familiar drains on their energy because loneliness feels harder than exploitation. But Jung knew something profound about this solitude. It's not emptiness. It's fullness waiting to be discovered. The silence that feels uncomfortable at first is actually your psyche cleaning house, clearing out the voices that aren't yours, the needs that aren't yours, the problems that were never yours to solve. In this space of conscious solitude, something alchemical happens. Where there was once confusion, clarity emerges. Where there was anxiety about others' opinions, peace settles in. Where there was neediness for external validation, self-respect grows. This is not the loneliness of abandonment. It's the solitude of self-discovery. You're not alone because nobody wants you. You're alone because you're finally learning to want yourself. You're not isolated because you're unlovable. You're creating space to become someone worthy of authentic love. Jung called this process individuation. The journey of becoming who you truly are beneath all the social conditioning, family expectations, and cultural programming. It's a hero's journey that takes place in the landscape of your own psyche. During this phase, you might feel like you're losing yourself, but you're actually finding yourself. The person who needed constant external validation is dying, so the person who generates internal worth can be born. The version of you that lived for others' approval is dissolving, so the version that lives from self-respect can emerge. This transformation isn't just psychological, it's energetic. When you stop leaking energy through constant reactions, explanations, and emotional availability, that energy turns inward. It begins to nourish parts of yourself that have been starving. Your creativity, your intuition, your authentic desires, your genuine peace. People will notice this change before you do. They'll comment that you seem different, more centered, less reactive. Some will be drawn to this new energy because authentic presence is magnetic. Others will be repelled by it because unconscious people are uncomfortable around consciousness. The key is not to rush this process. Solitude has its own timeline, its own rhythm. You can't force individuation any more than you can force a flower to bloom. But you can create the conditions for it. Boundaries that protect your energy, silence that allows self-reflection, space that enables self-discovery. After the discomfort of withdrawal and the alchemy of solitude comes something beautiful, the birth of authentic power. This isn't power over others, it's power over yourself. It's the ability to choose your responses rather than react automatically. It's the capacity to maintain your center regardless of the chaos around you. When you've learned to protect your energy, something shifts in how you move through the world. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone because your worth isn't up for debate. You don't need to explain your choices because they come from your authentic self rather than from people-pleasing programming. This authentic power has specific characteristics that are immediately recognizable. Selective engagement. You no longer feel compelled to participate in every conversation, respond to every provocation, or fix every problem that crosses your path. You choose consciously where to invest your energy, and that choice comes from wisdom rather than impulse. Comfortable silence. You can sit with discomfort, yours and others, without rushing to fill the space with words or actions. You understand that not every tension needs to be resolved immediately, not every conflict needs your input, not every emotional state needs to be fixed. Natural boundaries. Saying no becomes as natural as breathing because it comes from self-respect rather than rebellion. You don't need to justify your boundaries because they're not negotiable. They're simply facts about how you choose to live. Magnetic presence. When your energy isn't scattered across everyone else's problems, it becomes concentrated and powerful. People notice when you enter a room not because you're demanding attention, but because you're fully present to yourself. Emotional sovereignty. Other people's emotions affect you less because you're no longer trying to manage them. You can witness someone's pain without drowning in it, observe their drama without participating in it, acknowledge their problems without adopting them. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it's not always comfortable. There will be moments when you question whether you're being too harsh, too selfish, too cold. But these doubts are usually echoes of old programming, not indicators that you're moving in the wrong direction. The people who truly care about you will adjust to this new version of you because they'll recognize that it's healthier, more authentic, more sustainable. The ones who can't adjust were probably never really caring about you as a person. They were caring about what you provided for them. Jung understood that authentic power emerges not from controlling others, but from governing yourself. When you can manage your own energy, choose your own responses, and maintain your own center, you become truly powerful, not in a dominating way, but in a sovereign way. Here's the beautiful paradox Jung discovered. When you become less available to everyone, you become more valuable to the right people. When you stop chasing relationships, authentic connections find you. When you quit performing for approval, genuine appreciation emerges. This paradox works because scarcity creates value. When your attention, time, and energy aren't freely given to anyone who asks, they become precious resources that people respect. When you're not constantly available, your presence becomes a gift rather than an expectation. But it goes deeper than simple supply and demand. When you protect your energy and choose your engagements consciously, you show up differently. You're not depleted, resentful, or running on empty. You're present, centered, and genuinely available for what matters. The relationships that survive, your unavailability becomes stronger because they're based on choice rather than habit, quality rather than quantity, mutual respect rather than one-sided giving. The connections that don't survive weren't really connections at all. They were dependencies disguised as relationships. This process reveals something profound about human nature. Most people don't actually want your constant availability. What they want is to know they could have it if they needed it. It's the security of knowing you're there, not the reality of constant interaction, that matters to healthy people. The unhealthy people, however, will struggle with this new dynamic because they were feeding off your predictable availability. They were using your constant accessibility as a way to avoid developing their own emotional resources, their own coping mechanisms, their own internal stability. When you withdraw this crutch, they're forced to either grow or find another source of emotional supply. Either way, it's not your problem anymore. You've graduated from being someone's emotional emergency contact to being someone who engages consciously and selectively. This doesn't make you less loving. It makes you more discerning about where your love goes. It doesn't make you less caring. It makes you more careful about what you care about. It doesn't make you less available. It makes your availability meaningful rather than automatic. The paradox extends to how others perceive you. When you're constantly available, people often take you for granted or see you as weak. When you become selectively available, they respect your strength and value your presence more highly. This shift in perception isn't manipulation. It's natural. Human psychology. We value what we can't take for granted. We respect what we have to earn. We appreciate what comes from choice rather than compulsion. Understanding these principles intellectually is one thing. Integrating them into your daily life is another. The journey from constant availability to conscious selectivity requires practice, patience, and sometimes a complete rewiring of lifelong patterns. The transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it's not about making dramatic declarations or burning bridges. It's about small, consistent choices that gradually shift the entire dynamic of how you interact with the world. Start small, but start today. You don't need to make grand announcements or send emails explaining your new boundaries. Begin with tiny acts of self-respect. Taking a few minutes before responding to non-urgent messages, saying, "Let me think about it," instead of automatic yes responses. Choosing not to engage in gossip or drama that doesn't serve your peace. Here's a practical framework for beginning this transformation. The pause practice. Before responding to any request, demand, or emotional appeal, take a breath. Ask yourself, is this urgent, or does it just feel urgent because someone else is anxious? Most things that feel urgent are actually just someone else's poor planning or emotional reactivity becoming your emergency. The energy audit. Start paying attention to how you feel after interactions. Who leaves you energized and who leaves you drained? Which conversations inspire you and which ones feel like energy theft? This information is crucial data about where your energy should and shouldn't go. The explanation, detox. Challenge yourself to say no without elaborate justifications. "I can't do that" is a complete sentence. "That doesn't work for me" requires no additional explanation. "I'm not available" doesn't need to be followed by a detailed schedule of your activities. Notice your internal resistance as you begin this process. When you start setting boundaries, part of you will panic. The people pleaser in you will scream that you're being selfish, that people will hate you, that you'll end up alone. This voice has kept you safe in a certain way, but it's also kept you trapped in patterns that don't serve your highest good. The key is to acknowledge this inner resistance without letting it control your choices. Thank the part of you that's trying to protect you, but make decisions from your adult self rather than your wounded child self, who learned that love was conditional on being useful to others. Pay close attention to the reactions you get as you implement these changes. When you start becoming less available, you'll get valuable information about the people in your life. Those who support your growth and respect your boundaries are keepers. Those who guilt you, manipulate you, or attack you for protecting yourself are showing you exactly why you needed boundaries in the first place. Some people will try to shame you back into compliance. They'll say you've changed, become cold, lost your compassion. They'll accuse you of being selfish or uncaring. This is projection. They're angry that you're no longer available to serve their emotional needs, and they're trying to manipulate you back into the old dynamic. Others will respect your new boundaries and adjust their behavior accordingly. These are the people who are actually relating to you as a person rather than using you as an emotional resource. Their ability to adapt to your healthier boundaries is a sign of their own emotional maturity. Create daily rituals that support your new way of being. This might be a morning routine that centers you before you engage with others. giving you a strong foundation of self-connection that can't be easily shaken by external demands. It could be regular periods of solitude for reflection and recharging, time when you're completely unavailable and unapologetic about it. Consider end-of-day practices that help you release any energy that isn't yours. Maybe it's journaling about your interactions to distinguish between your authentic responses and your programmed reactions. Perhaps it's meditation or movement that helps you return to your center after being in the world of other people's energy. Remember that this is a practice, not a performance. There will be days when you slip back into old patterns, when you over-explain or over-give or over-accommodate. Don't judge yourself harshly for this. Growth isn't linear, and changing deeply ingrained patterns takes time and patience with yourself. The goal isn't to become cold or unreachable. The goal is to become conscious and selective. You want to be available from choice rather than compulsion, from strength rather than weakness, from self-respect rather than people-pleasing programming. As you integrate these changes, you'll notice your relationships naturally sorting themselves. Some will deepen as they become more authentic and mutual. Others will fade as they lose their dysfunctional dynamics. New connections will emerge. People who are drawn to your authentic presence rather than your accommodating nature. Your energy levels will stabilize and even increase as you stop leaking vital force through unconscious reactions and forced interactions. Your self-respect will grow as you consistently honor your own needs and boundaries. Your peace will deepen as you learn to stay centered regardless of external chaos. Taking a few minutes before responding to non-urgent messages, saying, "Let me think about it," instead of automatic yes responses. Choosing not to engage in gossip or drama. Notice your internal resistance. When you start setting boundaries, part of you will panic. The people pleaser in you will scream that you're being selfish, that people will hate you, that you'll end up alone. This is normal. This voice has kept you safe in a certain way, but it's also kept you trapped. The key is to acknowledge this inner resistance without letting it control your choices. Thank the part of you that's trying to protect you, but make decisions from your adult self rather than your wounded child self. Pay attention to the reactions you get. When you start becoming less available, you'll get valuable information about the people in your life. Those who support your growth and respect your boundaries are keepers. Those who guilt you, manipulate you, or attack you for protecting yourself are showing you exactly why you needed boundaries in the first place. Create rituals that support your new way of being. This might be a morning routine that centers you. Before you engage with others, regular periods of solitude for reflection and recharging, or end-of-day practices that help you release any energy that isn't yours. Remember that this is a practice, not a performance. There will be days when you slip back into old patterns, when you over-explain or over-give or over-accommodate. Don't judge yourself for this. Growth isn't linear, and changing deeply ingrained patterns takes time. The goal isn't to become cold or unreachable. The goal is to become conscious and selective. You want to be available from choice rather than compulsion, from strength rather than weakness, from self-respect rather than people-pleasing. As you integrate these changes, you'll notice your relationships naturally sorting themselves. Some will deepen as they become more authentic. Others will fade as they lose their dysfunctional dynamics. New connections will emerge. People who are drawn to your authentic presence rather than your accommodating nature. Your energy levels will stabilize and even increase as you stop leaking vital force through unconscious reactions and forced interactions. Your self-respect will grow as you consistently honor your own needs and boundaries. Your peace will deepen as you learn to stay centered regardless of external chaos. Carl Jung spent his life studying what it means to become a complete, authentic human being. His insights about the power of conscious unavailability point to a fundamental truth. You cannot become who you're meant to be while constantly accommodating who others want you to be. The journey from constant availability to conscious selectivity is not about becoming antisocial or uncaring. It's about becoming discerning about where your precious life energy goes. It's about choosing connection over convenience, depth over drama, quality over quantity. When you stop being available to everyone for everything, you become available to yourself for the first time in perhaps years. In that space of self-availability, magic happens. You remember your own voice, you reconnect with your authentic desires, you rediscover the person you were before the world told you who you should be. Yes, some people will be uncomfortable with this new version of you. Yes, some relationships will end. Yes, there will be moments of loneliness and doubt. But on the other side of this discomfort lies something precious, the freedom to be yourself without apology. This freedom doesn't come from changing others or controlling circumstances. It comes from changing your relationship with your own energy, your own time, your own peace. It comes from understanding that your availability is a gift, not an obligation, and that gifts are only meaningful when they're given freely. The people who matter will understand. The connections that are meant to last will survive and thrive. The relationships built on mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation will become the foundation of a life lived authentically. Jung knew that the goal of human development isn't to be liked by everyone. It's to be true to yourself. It's not to make everyone comfortable. It's to make choices that align with your authentic nature. It's not to be constantly available. It's to be meaningfully present when and where you choose. So ask yourself, are you ready to stop being controlled by others' expectations? Are you willing to disappoint some people in order to honor yourself? Can you handle being misunderstood by those who never really understood you anyway? If your answer is yes, then you're ready for the transformation that comes when you stop being available to everyone and start being available to yourself. You're ready to discover that when you change how you show up in the world changes how it responds to you. The journey begins with a single step. The next time someone expects you to be automatically available, choose consciousness. Instead, choose to pause. Choose to consider. Choose yourself. Your authentic self is waiting for you on the other side of that choice. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred.